Alright, so this is going to be the last video in this short little series. We're going to be walking through the process of setting up port forwarding. So first thing we did was we set up this PFsense firewall, which allowed us to then access, which allowed us a physical machine for us to set up routing and such. Then we set up these machines to put them behind that firewall, connected to the LAN. And now we're going to set up port forwarding so that each of these individual ports are able to talk to all of the services needed as outlined in our scenario document. Like these ports here are what we're going to be using for our information. But let's just get started. So we're going to need to open up preferably a Windows machine. Well, not really preferably. It's just more consistent, I feel. Let's yoink yoink. Ah, this Internet Explorer. I might use a different one. 10.0.0.1 HTTPS. All right. So this is just going to be HTTPS the IP address of your LAN router, which is going to be 10.0.0.1. And continue to this website, not recommended. Gonna put in the admin credentials. I have my own password saved, so I'm just gonna skip that part. All right, we've got our password in. You should have had that saved somewhere. Let's sign back in. Close this tab. All right, we're logged in. So we're going to need to set up port forwarding, and to do that, we're going to need to go to a firewall, and we're going to go to NAT. But yeah, we're going to go through here, and you can see we have a bunch of rules, and we have none currently. This is going to be filled with quite a lot when we're done. And we're going to need to be multiple rules for each machine depending on how many ports we need open. So let's figure out what ports we need to open. So on this Jelly machine, which octet is that? That's 20. All right. So on this Jelly machine, we're going to need. Actually, we can just scroll down here. We don't need to look in the notes. You can see through this required access, it's going to tell us we need access to port 8096. IT administrators must be able to access, blah blah blah. But essentially, if any like account needs access to something on a port, we're gonna need to open that port fully, and then when the whatever login screen greets them when they go to that port, will be managing authentication. So we don't have to necessarily worry about the IT administrators part of this yet, or the creators part. We just need to worry about the be able to access. So this is also port 8096. This is 8096. All right. So let's go through here. All right, had a short pause there. Started coughing. I had some stuff to do. But here we have. Okay, so we need to add a rules. We're gonna go add to here. So here we have our our interface, which is going to be our WAN, which is going to be our Active Directory. Because if you look at back at the PFSense, you'll notice WAN goes to 6.87.159.10. Which, if we look in our scenario, is just our Active Directory. That's the IP address for it, and that's what we're going to have traffic need to be routed to. So in protocol here, we're going to select TCP. Then we're going to select, okay, type address. So the destination is going to be our WAN address, which is going to be that 6.87.159.10. You get the gist. That's going to be geared out. So then we're going to look for a specific port. So if we look here, we're going to need RDP access. And we have two options here. We can either say RDP, which it might not have in here, MSRDP to MSRDP. Okay, so it's either going to be RDP, which is should be that 3389. Actually, let me even verify that. MSRDP port number. Yep, TCP 3389. Great. So then that port range is set, and now the target IP we're going to type in directly. So that's going to be 10.0.0.10. Right? 4 octets, 10.0.0.10, which is going to be what our Active Directory has set. And then we're going to have this exact same target port. So MSRDP, not DS. RDP. And description. Okay, so we've done basically all we need to do here. However, we're going to give a little description here just for documentation purposes, as well as for easy perusal. So if we mess up anytime here, we can always look through them and be like, okay, I remember messing up on this one, which is going to be um, RDP access on port 3389 for active for AD box. And box is just saying machine because it's a virtual machine. We call it box. Fancy slang. Fancy slang. All right. So then we're gonna save, and you notice this one's up here. So if we then were to try to apply that change, if we were then to go from like this another outside machine and try to RDP connect to Active Directory, we would now be able to. There is now a route. There's a path. The firewall is not going to block it. It's going to directly take the traffic to 6.87.159.10, and it's going to put it to 10.0.10, which is our box. All right. Okay. Now we're going to add another rule. How exciting! This one's also going to be for WAN because we also need to do the LDAP access on port 389. So WAN IPv4 protocol is going to be TCP, and destination port range. Make sure the destination is the WAN address. WAN address. Port range is going to be LDAP, which is right here, very handy. And the destination is going to be 10.0.0.10, if I can type. Redirect target port is yet again going to be LDAP. Again, the point of this is that we're almost directly translating traffic from this machine, this IP address, back to the actual machine here. But we're just specifying exactly which traffic, because all of the traffic will just get dropped. It won't go anywhere. It won't be sent anywhere, and it'll be drop traffic, and our wonderful red team will not be able to attack us through it. Okay, LDAP access on port 389. So let's say LDAP access on port 389 for AD box. All right, save. Great. We got one box down already. This is much quicker than it normally is. So actually, let's look at which one has 0.20. Let's start with that one. I believe the Jelly does. Jelly does. How exciting. All right, so let's go all the way up to Jelly. Jelly. Let's look at what required access needs. So it looks like we need port 8096, and RDP on port 3389. Great. So what we're going to do is going to add another. And the interface we're going to change this time. Rather than being WAN, we're going to be opt1, because we want to do that one with the last octet being 0.20. So that's 6.87.159.20 or 0.20. We're going to do opt1. We're going to do TCP. We're going to opt1 address. Yep, that's going to go to that one. And then we're going to do, which protocol was it? Port 8096. I don't know what actual protocol that is, so what we're going to do now is we're going to select other, and we're going to be able to type in the custom. So 8096, 8096. This is just making sure it's only one port. By default, this has the option to have a whole range, so you could just say 0 to 6250, and like all traffic, all ports would just go through that. That would be a way to make, that would be a very unintelligent way to do this, but it is an option. You can do that. But if we go to 10.0.0.20, we can do that. Target port, again, we're going to put in 8096. All right. And then we're going to say website access on port 8096 for Jellyfin box. Or is it just called Jelly? Yeah, it's just called Jelly. All right. Website access on, if I can spell, port 8096 for Jelly box. All right. I'm just going to capitalize that for consistency. You can tell the OCD exists. It's very real. Save. All right. So that's one for the thing, and you can see you have here website access for Jellybox, for 80box, for 80box. Those are all nice and documented. If we want to take a perusal, we can just look at that directly. And now we're going to need access for RDP on port 3389. So again, opt1, TCP protocol, opt1 address, destination port range, RDP, which is going to be actually called MS RDP. Just saying Microsoft RDP, which is, well, most RDP. 3389. The box address is going to be 10.0.0.20. And MS RDP and now it's going to be RDP access on port 389. Am I 3389? Okay, 3389 for jelly box. We're gonna do a lot of these. Get ready. All right, so we finished 2 machines. Now we want to do whichever one's the third. So NAS. We're gonna add. Let's find the NAS server. All right. So which ones does this one need open? This machine uses NFS. You'll need to allow these ports and run through the firewall. Not sure if that means locally. NFS access on port 2049 or administrative access on port 22. Okay. Must be able to add. So I'm not necessarily sure if this through the firewall is talking about network level or just for on the local machine, because it is very likely that it means on the local machine here. Okay, let's look at this. 404455. Alright, let me pause this for a minute, figure out what we're doing here. Alright, so after consorting with my peers, who are much smarter than me, it is decided that this is not meant to be open. Here's a little bit why. So essentially, on each of the machines, there's a network or there's a local firewall that these need to have access through. However, that only needs to be available locally. Only these machines need to access that. No other outside external machines need to have any sort of communication with that. Let me just get back here. So what that means is that if you were to say remote desktop directly to this machine, which you don't need to, you can SSH though. So if you were to SSH on that machine, you might be able to do something with the file system. But if you were to like say have like a custom application that accesses that port and accesses the files, it would not be able to do that. It would not be able to access that, and it should not be able to access that. Make sense? Makes sense. All right. So we're going to go in here. We're going to go to op2, which let's just double check. 10.30. And NAS is in fact 0.30. Op2, protocol TCP, op2 address, SSH, which should be in here. If it's not, I'm going to cry. SSH, let's go. I love SSH. 10.0.0.30. That redirect target port. Again, SSH. We gotta be consistent here. Description, SSH access on port 22 for NAS box. Lovely. All right. Save that. Great. Now let's go to the next one. We only have 2 left. And the next one is going to be the www. Alright, this one's kind of important, but it's not much more complicated. So let's add, and let's find www in our documentation. It's down here somewhere. There it is. Alright, website, Ubuntu server, blah, blah, blah. Alright, this has 3? Nope, it only has 2. Alright. That's much simpler than I thought, which is great, because less is in fact more here. So we're going to need to enable HTTP access on port 5000, as well as administrative access on port 22. So let's do that. So we have op3. You can double check. Op3 is for 40. The last octet being 40. The last octet being here is 40. That is good. That is great. All right, TCP and op3 address. Lovely. Now let's make sure HTTP on, actually, we're going to not say HTTP because I believe the default is not what we're going to want here. So we're going to say 5000 and 5000. In fact, check me on this. I'm not sure if 5,000 is the default HTTP. I'm just not quite sure, and I don't want to risk it. All right. 10.0.0.40. Redirect target port. 5,000. Description. HTTP access on port, if I can spell, on port 5,000 for www box. All right. And it was I'll cover the net deflection on the next one. All right, but let's just do this next one, which is going to be op3 again. Protocol TCP. Destination port. It's going to be SSH. Check that right here. Yep, SSH. 10.0.0.40. Yep. All right. SSH. Let's do it. That's nope. Wrong thing. I don't even know what SMB trap is. SSH access on, if I can spell, on port 2020 for www box. All right. So this NAT reflection, this is basically saying if you are on the local network, if you are on here, should traffic follow these rules? So it's saying should this to this have to go all the way through this to get to here? And the answer is for that is no. We don't want that. We don't care for that. And the system default should be no. We're actually going to search to make sure that is no in a little bit here. But let's just save. That's good. All right. We got the www machine done. Now we only have one more, and I believe that is 50, which is going to be the IRC. All right. So the IRC is going to need some amount of stuff available. Let's find it. IRC server. All right. Required access. Port 6667 and port 22. Wow, these are actually really not a whole lot of open access, which is really good for us because this limits the ways that red team can attack. Add interface is going to be the very last one, op4. Protocol, TCP, other. So I believe this is called IRC. Yep, it is going to be IRC. And it might not be in here. There's a good chance it is not in here. If you can see it, I can't see it. I'm going to then click other, and it is port 6667. Very spooky number, but 6667. And address is going to be 10.0.0.50. Yep. Address is going to be 6667. Description: IRC access, if I can spell again, on port 6667 for IRC box. And NAT reflection default. Yep. Alright. Now let's add one more. Let's just get rid of that little box. Art for protocol TCP. Destination port range is going to be SSH. Let us just double check that real quick. Administrative SSH access. Yep. Going to be that. Let's do 10.0.0.50. Target port is going to yet again be SSH. Description: SSH access on port. Literally every time I've spelled this, I don't know how I've managed that. On port 22 for IRC box. All right, NAT reflection. Good, good, save. Okay, so really important. We're gonna want to click apply changes. This is gonna apply this to the box, and it is actually going to start reloading. These are all saved, but yeah, it's going to reload. And while we're doing that, let's actually look for that system default setting for internal or NAT reflection. I just looked up into system advanced. It might be in firewall and NAT. All right. It's probably going to be in NAT. So network trap. Yep. Okay. So we can see this here: network address translation, which is what NAT stands for. NAT reflection mode for port forwards is disabled by default. So that's going to be disabled by default. So it's not going to try to do it. We don't want to try to do it. This is good. This is as it's supposed to be, which is good to know. Let's just go back here. Now let's check to see if these have applied while the time we've been away. All right. These look like they have in fact been applied. So let us, can I copy and paste this? Kinda, it's kinda ugly, I'm not gonna do that. But we're gonna go on the PFsense box, we're gonna snapshot. And remember, when we do these changes in the admin console, they are actually affecting this machine. It's just a console, nothing special. We're gonna take a snapshot, port forwarding. All right, here's the fun part. We get to get all these descriptions. Oh, I don't want to drag that. Okay. But I'm just gonna speed through this, get all these descriptions in there, just to make for documentation. You don't have to do this. This is not required. But again, documentation good practices are in fact very good practices. So please do. But I'm just gonna do that real quick. Alright, that's all finished then. I'm just going to create a snapshot there. So this is going to save our changes. Just something to note about the overall like networking of this. You can see that all these boxes have like either SSH or RDP. The only difference between these two is that SSH is used for Linux because it is a terminal based. You'll notice in Linux, if I open up the www, I don't know who's been in this. I might be in some session. But you'll notice like this is just like lines of text rather than like an actual screen. And that's just because SSH is Linux doesn't necessarily need a GUI, and SSH doesn't use a GUI at all. It just uses text-based or terminal-based, while RDP is used on Windows because RDP or the GUI is required on Windows. But that'll be all for this video. I hope these 3 videos have helped you get your firewall and network set up. It's one of the hardest parts of like doing this whole thing is understanding the network. But once you do understand it, it's quite simple, it's quite fun, and it's actually one of the most valuable skills for cybersecurity. So, I hope you learned something, and have a wonderful day.